Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to see you. As you know, I just came back yesterday afternoon, after attending this UN conference on climate change in Copenhagen. On Saturday morning in Copenhagen, in fact, I had a press conference with your colleagues who were attending in Copenhagen. Today, I'm pleased to meet with you basically to answer some questions which you may have. Last time I didn't have much time to answer questions, but I have also a Security Council briefing at 10 o'clock on very important African issues. Let me first of all say the conference was a success. Among the conference decisions, the Copenhagen Accord marks a significant step forward. First, it commits countries to work to limit global temperature rise to below 2 degrees Celsius. It also says that they will review this commitment in 2015 to take account of new scientific evidence. I understand that the IPCC is going to, they will try to release their 5th assessment report in 2014. Second, the accord includes mid-term mitigation targets by developed countries and mid-term mitigation actions by developing countries. Again, this is an advance. Third, countries have agreed on the importance of acting to reduce emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. This means we have finally brought the source of nearly 1/5 of global emissions into the emerging climate regime. Fourth, the Accord agrees to provide comprehensive support to the most vulnerable to cope with climate change. Fifth, the deal is backed by money and the means to deliver it. You know that already $30 billion have been committed until 2012, and after that $100 billion annually up to 2020. I urge countries to ensure that the Copenhagen Green Climate Fund becomes fully operational as soon as possible. I urge all governments to formally sign on to the Copenhagen Accord by registering their support through the UNFCCC. The faster we have all the signatures, the more momentum we can build. The decisions made in Copenhagen fulfill in large part the benchmarks for success that I had laid down at the September 2009 summit meeting here in UN headquarters. Admittedly, they do not yet meet the scientific bottom line to keep global temperature rise to below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. But without the commitments in the Copenhagen Accord, we could be facing the real prospect of temperature rises of up to 6 degrees Celsius. During the coming month, I will continue my work with world leaders to increase their level of ambition. I will urge all to implement their commitments as soon as possible, and I will encourage them to directly engage in achieving a global, legally binding climate change treaty in 2010. Their hands-on investment helped to seal the deal in Copenhagen. It demonstrates that world leaders not only appreciate the importance of tackling climate change, but that they are prepared to act. It is also notable that the countries that had previously stayed on the periphery of the Kyoto process are now at the center of global climate action. As we move forward, we will examine the lessons of the Copenhagen conference. We will consider how to streamline the negotiations process. We will also look at how to encompass the full context of climate change and development in the negotiations, both substantially and institutionally. Early next year, I will establish a high-level panel on development and climate change to strategically address such issues. While I'm satisfied that we sealed the deal, I'm aware that the outcome of the Copenhagen conference including the Copenhagen Accord, did not go as far as many would have hoped. Nonetheless, they represent a beginning, an essential beginning. We have taken an important step in the right direction. Thank you very much.
Mr. Secretary General, your assessment of the conference is quite different from many who have said that it was a failure, they called it a disaster, and so on. So I'd like to ask two questions. First of all, the British Prime Minister has said the conference was hijacked by a number of countries. How do you respond to that? And secondly, other critics have said that the conference was a massive blow to the UN framework in that it became clear that these issues could not be agreed to by consensus, and only a number of countries came forward with a deal which the others very grudgingly and reluctantly accepted. How do you respond to those two questions?
I know there are different assessments on the outcome of this climate change conference in Copenhagen. Basically, I believe that overwhelming member states agree that it was a success. It was a very significant step forward to agreeing to a legally binding treaty as soon as possible. The Copenhagen was, in fact, was about finding a way forward to deal with a huge problem, a very complex, very difficult problems. Negotiations took a long time. The positions of many member states entrenched, and it was quite a difficult and tough process. In that regard, a way forward that pushes all countries to take action. It is not perfect at this time, but it was very important, essentially a very significant step forward. This, as I said, we have been able to achieve all the elements which we have laid down in a September summit meeting in UN headquarters in September. And about this, your second part of question about being hijacked or relevance of the multilateralism, I believe this accord represents almost all member states of the country's positions. Of course, I understand that all the elements does not meet the full satisfaction of all the countries. But we didn't expect that we would be able to have this legally binding treaty satisfying all the elements and to all the member states. But I think we did get what we need to make this process move on. There were some countries who really expressed reservations, both on procedural matters and both on the substantive matters. On procedurally, because of the complexity and the very slow process of negotiation, the president of the COP15 established a small group of member states, around 30 member states, representing all different stakeholders. First of all, G77 and China was represented, list of developed countries, small island developing countries, European Union, and major, biggest polluting countries. They were all represented. Therefore, in terms of representation, I thought that they were fully representative. Of course, I admit that there was some lack of transparency because we were not able to fully consult with all 192 member states at that time. We had only 1.5 a day for such a very difficult negotiation. On substantive matters, there are some more to be done. I'm sure that in the course of our negotiation, further negotiation to make this globally acceptable treaty form, we will be able to build upon on this Copenhagen Accord.
Second question. Yes, could you tell us, Mr. Secretary General, what role you were able to personally play in facilitating the work of the 30 member states that you mentioned, and also the behind-the-scenes deal that President Obama helped to broker that did not have any targets or did not have any other commitments concerning verification or financial help. But to what extent were you personally involved? And I think there's also one question.
I think everybody has played important role, not necessarily myself. Of course, President Obama has played a very important role at the last minute when this negotiation was stuck on important issues like verification issues and other mitigation target issues. He played a very crucially important role. And for me, I have been, as you know, during the last 3 years, I have been discussing this issue with world leaders, first of all raising political awareness and trying to mobilize a political leadership role, trying to mobilize necessary financial and technological support for developing countries. Particularly during this summit meeting, as well as before this summit meeting, I have been very closely consulting with the chair of this Copenhagen summit meeting, Prime Minister Rasmussen, and also Environment Minister Hedegaard, who was first elected as a COP president. And in addition to this Danish host government, I have been extending my network of consultation with many world leaders, major world leaders, major emitters, as well as major most vulnerable countries. At the end of this negotiation was almost at the deadlock. Finally, on Saturday morning, I also played a certain role to convince those people who were having strong reservations on, first of all, the procedural matters as well as some substantive element. I emphasized that we have come such a long way. We didn't have any time to lose. And if we had to defer this to another negotiation process, then we would not be able to immediately operationalize this financial support and technological support. This accord, political accord, has an immediate operational effect, starting from January next year, providing financial and technological support to most vulnerable developing countries. And therefore, even though I understand that there are some different assessments, we should build upon on this climate Copenhagen Accord so that we will be able to have legally binding treaty as soon as possible.
Two other critiques, if you don't mind, maybe you can respond to. The G77, which has 130 members, the chairman called this the worst deal in history. And I think they're alleging that the smaller countries were sort of bought, or not by you personally, obviously, but sort of bribed to come to this last-minute agreement. Otherwise, they wouldn't get the money in January. Also, people have raised some issues about conflicts of interest by Mr. Pachauri, business interests that he has through the Tata Group and Deutsche Bank, and this is an issue that was raised to the parties there. What can be done to make sure that in all this green deals that there are not financial conflicts as well in terms of disclosure, even of the UN and IPCC's own personnel?
Many of the G77 group leaders represented in that negotiation very actively. Therefore, when G77 group representatives spoke, I was not quite sure whether that really truly represented officially in an official way to represent the G77 group members. As you may have seen this debate in the plenary hall, there were many G77 countries as well as countries from small island developing states, least developed states, landlocked countries, they all supported, expressed their support for this political accord. That's what I can tell you at this time. Of course, I do not represent, or I cannot speak for the exact position of G77 groups. Yeah.
On the issue of financial conflicts, there's an article in the Telegraph today, but it's been a long time coming, that sort of brings together the allegations that at the top levels of the IPCC that there are in fact business investments that benefit from the deal. Is there some? What do you make of that?
Business psychology will change, will shift with this political accord. They will know that their business, their investment for green economy and clean energy will be much cheaper than they would do later. Therefore, as soon as this climate Copenhagen Accord is translated into a legally binding treaty, I'm sure that the business community will shift their business operations toward the green growth economy. And many business community and businesses have already done that. And this is a good, encouraging sign. With this political accord, I'm sure that this will help shift their business psychologies. Yeah.
Yes. To get the agreement of a new legally binding treaty, what is the most important factor, and when is your deadline next year to get the agreement of legal binding treaty?
I will not report all this negotiation process, but the member states have identified already key elements. What needs to be done, agreed in a legally binding treaty. We have agreed on global temperature rise to within below 2 degrees. There was some discussions again, particularly reflected by small island developing countries. They wanted to go down much lower than 2 degrees, preferably below 1.5 degrees. That has not been decided yet. We will have to wait until 2014 when IPCC fifth assessment report will be released. And then there will be an opportunity of review our commitment, all this implementation course in 2015, including the global temperature rise issues. And we need to have clear mitigation target goals agreed by developed countries and also developing countries, their mitigation action, voluntary mitigation action. Now the member states will have to submit their mitigation targets by January 31st next year. These mitigation action reports will be annexed to this political accord. Then mitigation actions, voluntary actions, nationally appropriate mitigation actions taken by non-Annex 1 countries will be also communicated every 2 years. And there has been quite significant development and progress in terms of making all these mitigation actions in a transparent way through a measurable, reportable, and verifiable way. This is quite significant progress. Yes.
I'll ask your question of her. You said that you want to see a legally binding agreement in 2010. How optimistic are you that this is going to happen? And I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit on what you said about re-looking at how the negotiations took place, because there was a lot of criticism that it was too unwieldy. How are you going to re-look at this to prevent something coming down to the wire with no time left, again, in Mexico?
I have already discussed with President Calderon of Mexico, and we have, I assured him that the United Nations will very closely work together with the host government so that we will have a successful COP16 meeting in Mexico. Then about the deadline, we will have to expedite. What I learned from this Copenhagen process was that while we were able to see much heightened political will, and there was a common purpose, common will to act on this. But however, the national positions, they were not yet united. The leaders were united in purpose, but they were not yet united in action. That's what I observed. Therefore, it will be very important for the United Nations, for me as a Secretary General, to really help the leaders' political will to be translated into action. The negotiations were very tough. Their positions were really entrenched in their own national positions. That will be quite a big challenge for the United Nations and for world leaders altogether. But I do really appreciate at this time to all the world leaders who have taken time and patiently participated in all these negotiations, very tough negotiations. And I would really hope that urge and appeal to world leaders and world opinion makers that while I know that not everybody is satisfied with this result, this was quite a significant achievement which we were able to make in Copenhagen, considering all this complexity and difficulties of this issue. It was not an easy task. We know that, everybody knows that it would not be an easy task. Therefore, we should be more proactive, we should be more forthcoming rather than critical. I would be very willing to discuss on this issue with other world leaders and other opinion makers and even civic community leaders, how we can do better, how we can also change all this negotiation process. Those are some lessons which we have learned. But on all these lessons will be very carefully reviewed from today for a better result next year. Thank you very much for your support. Thank you.